All right, so now I'm gonna go over creating kind of a floor slash site plan. So like the floor plan, we typically will show everything else that's happening within the site, right? Now we do have a site plan, traditional typical site plan is more like a roof plan, where we see everything from up above. But that takes up more space. That's an additional drawing. Now, if we were doing construction documents and we were submitting to the city, then I say, yes, we absolutely need it. That's a requirement for construction drawings. But for presentation drawings, we're trying to show the most amount of information in maybe the least amount of time, or try to put as much information in one single drawing so that when we're showing the clients or we're showing a review board, we're not constantly flipping through different drawings. Plus, if we're printing, that's an additional space on the presentation board. That's an additional slide in the presentation. So we're trying to kind of consolidate all this information into one single drawing. So instead, what we do, or one strategy, I should say, is that we'll cut a floor plan. And in the floor plan, in the first floor plan, we'll show the actual site itself, right? Um, now, when we're designing, especially for, a studio class, what your goal when it comes to creating a site plan is should be is creating a site that matches the aesthetic of your building, right? So if I have, here I have these kind of offset rectangles, well, then my site itself should be kind of a offset rectangle type feel, right? I don't want to just go ahead and, have the building be one kind of design aesthetic and the site itself be a completely different design aesthetic. Now, in addition to that, one thing I don't have on this because it's not a real project, I just did this really quickly, is site context. So I don't know where the main streets are. I don't know where people are walking through. I don't know any sight lines. I don't know have any views. And all that information, kind of the site context, how do you weave the site or how do you weave your project into the neighborhood and into the community? That is all part of creating the site work. And that's something I didn't take into consideration when creating this site plan because this is just a tutorial on kind of presentation qualities or creating the presentation drawings. So what I did do though, and again, this was really random, really quickly. I just did a bunch of rectangles, created a bunch of rectangles, and then just kind of cleaned it up. And so this is what I ended up with. And what I'm thinking is that possibly this area here is grass, and what we see kind of on the inside is a solid, and then I punched out a couple more rectangles on the inside, and that could also be grass or some sort of dirt material. I did a bunch of rectangles, cleaned it all up, and then I started to kind of align. So like that's why these things begin to align, so looks like a bit more intentional. So there's a bit of kind of randomness, arbitrariness to the rectangles, but there's also a bit of alignment, so it doesn't look completely messy. And the part where I say, tying it to a neighborhood or community, that's would have been the next revision is like, okay, well, where are people actually walking through? Maybe this needs to be a hardscape instead of softscape, and maybe I extend this or I move this and I shift this, right? So those types of moves begin to come into play when designing the site work, right? Um, By the way, I'm not going to, if you've already watched the other two lectures on the floor plan and the section perspective, a lot of the Adobe Illustrator stuff is now repetitive. So I'm not really going to cover all of that stuff. I'm just going to show you how to get started with this kind of floor slide slash site plan. So I drew everything up. What I actually did was I drew a rectangle along the site and I moved it. Actually, what I ended up doing was moving it a specific dimension. So I think I moved it like 300 feet. And I moved it a specific dimension because then I could go ahead and draw my rectangles. I'd go into top view, right? And actually what I ended up doing as well was tracing my first floor. And since my first floor is a rectangle, I can just draw a rectangle here and then select that curve and move it 300 feet. And then in my top view, this is where I can go ahead and start drawing and doing what I want to do. Once I'm done, I could select the whole thing and you guessed it, moved it back negative 300 feet and it moves into place, right? So that's how I did it. Now, one thing that we can do, one thing that's really important in this project, and this isn't true with every project, so take a look at your own project. How important is it that I understand the overhangs, right? Understand that if I'm standing right here, I want to showcase that I have line work. I have like a building mass right above my head. And I want to showcase that if I'm here, that I have the bottom of a building, 2 floors, essentially like 3 stories up, right? And so I have this like solid mass hovering over my head. And so that's important to show. We could show that in a drawing using dashed lines. So a dashed line on a floor plan is representing something either behind or above you. Um, sorry, something like behind is an object, or something that is behind you, like above your head. And so we can go ahead and draw those lines. Now, the way I go about doing that is, we could technically like just copy this down, I guess. I didn't even think about this. We could probably copy this straight down. I mean, if I did it better. Um, Maybe not. Yeah, I wouldn't even do that. Um, oh, look, I copied it so many times. There we go. Okay. The best way, so we could copy it straight down and you can just trace it that way. That's one strategy. One of the strategies I wanted to show you though was using the command dupe edge, which is duplicate the edge. So dupe edge, hit enter. This will allow us to duplicate, create line work for the edge here. Right? And I'm going to duplicate this edge. And just like that. And then once I'm done, I'll hit enter. Okay. And now I have the line work that I need. And then what I'll go ahead and do is project these lines to the C-plane. Remember that the C-plane is wherever this grid is, okay? Um, so this is our C-plane. So if I use the command project to C-plane, do I want to delete the input? Sure, why not? And now these lines were projected, went straight down. Now they're technically down below my floor plane. So I believe these floors. You know what? I'm actually going to group them because I don't want to have to click all these lines. So now I could select this. I believe this is 3 feet up, but I can actually take a measurement right here. So from here up is 2 feet. So all I have to do is select this, click, and move that up 2 feet. Okay. And there's my lines. I'm going to go ahead and put this in a layer. Okay. That is, I already have ABV for above. So when I highlight this, there we have that, right? I already have these. I changed the line type as a hidden line, but this really doesn't matter because it's going to come in as a solid in Illustrator. So we could go ahead and actually just leave this as a continuous, just like that. Just as long as we know that this line is the above line and this line is part of the ground. Okay. So you want to do all of your site work drawing, all of the line work in Rhino. And then we'll go ahead and take this down. And we're going to cut a floor plan. So I'm going to get this really close to leveled right around right there. And then I'll bring this up 4 feet because that's where our floor plans are cut. And then I'll go ahead and turn off. I have my zoom things in the way. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the clipping plane. So now when I go to my top view, I can select the whole thing and then do a make 2D, right? Now I've already done the make 2D. and this is what I get. Okay. So from here, what I'm going to do, I think, is here we go. Let's go ahead and print this. Now my site, I'm going to go ahead and print at a 16th inch scale. So we're going to go ahead and Control P. We're probably going to need something bigger than a tablet. So let's go with the Arc D. We'll go landscape. We want vector, black and white. I think, well, that's not what we want to print. So let's go ahead and set our window from there to there. Sure, it doesn't really matter. We'll hit enter. And then right here, scale to fit. We're going to change this to a 16th inch scale. Oh, I'm going to get some of that stuff in there. Let's change the paper size then. Let's go smaller. Arc C. There we go. And our scale is set to 1/16. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit print. And then we'll go ahead and save it. Let's call this site plan, even though it's more of a floor plan. Okay, and there we have it. All right, now we're going to go ahead and select the whole thing and export this. So we could export the, actually, you know what? This is on the layer. Good thing we stopped. So we want to put this lines or these lines on its own layer because this is our property line. So the property line has a different type of line type. And then we also want our walls. So let's go ahead and select this. I already have a walls layer from the previous lecture. So let's go ahead and just put that in the same layer. I'm going to create a property line. Let's call it prop. Oh, do I already have one in there? There it is. You're right. Okay. So I have this line, this prop. Let's go ahead and change object layer. And then I'm going to go ahead and these are the above already. Let's make sure that they're, yep. So we have that. And I think that's it. Everything else will be on the same layer. So that's fine. All right. So now let's go ahead and select the whole thing. We'll go File, Export Selected, and let's call this, we called it Site Plan, right? Nope. Site Plan. Spell it correctly. Make sure that it's saved as an Adobe Illustrator file. We could click here and find that it's an Adobe Illustrator. We'll hit save and we'll just hit OK. All right, let's go over to, all right, so I already have my top view silhouettes and my swatches open. So let's go ahead and open up the PDF. We'll go to File, Open, and let's find the site plan. We'll hit Open. That's what we get. Let's go ahead and open up, File, Open, the Illustrator file, which is right there. We'll hit Open. There you have it, right? All right, so now what we're going to do is, let's check out our layers. I'm going to create a new layer and I'm going to call this print. I'll go ahead and lock everything else. And I'm going to come in here and do a cross window around my print and click, drag, and drop. Let's go ahead and rotate this. Remember, this is really, really important. North is always up. Okay, so what that means, oops, I meant to turn all these off. Remember that if I'm standing in the middle of my building and I'm looking up, that should be your north wall. So that means that this is my north elevation. That means this is east, this is south, this is west. If you're not sure, go onto Google Maps, type in the address of your site and how it is shown in Google Maps. Google Maps always shows you in true north. So it'll actually show you exactly what it should look like. Now, most sites are kind of like at an angle, right? Because nothing is really ever oriented as a true north. But you make the call as to what is north. So in this case, it makes more sense that this is more than likely like your north wall. So we're going to go ahead and, oops, sorry. We were going to go ahead and rotate it to so that north is up. Okay. All right. So now that I have my print here, right? Remember, our print is to scale. We printed this at a 16th inch scale. So we do not want to adjust or scale this because then our drawing is no longer going to be at a 16th inch scale. So let's go ahead and lock the print. Let's turn all of my other layers on. Let's go ahead and lock those. I'm going to do a cross window. At this point, this is kind of repetitive. Let's go ahead and do a cross window, scale this up. And there we have that. All right, let's change the point to, let's say, let's say 1. All right, now we're done. So I'm going to bring this down. So at this point, I would go ahead and change my line weights and adjust my line weights. So let's start off with the base. Start off with everything being 0.5. That seems more appropriate. Okay. Now, up until now, we've always said that your cut line is always going to be your thickest line, right? So that means that our walls, let me turn everything else off. Our walls, oh, let me turn off the print. Our walls should be our thickest line. So if that's the case, let's change these and let's put them to 1, right? So let's see what that looks like. That looks a bit better. That looks good. Now, we always say that what you're cutting through is your thickest line. That's not actually 100% true. When we're doing drawings, for most drawings, what you're cutting through is your thickest line. On a site plan, though, your thickest line is actually your property line, right? So your thickest line is always going to be your property line on a drawing. So if this is a 1, let's go ahead and turn all this off, select the whole thing. Let's make this a 2. Now your property line also has a very different line type, okay? So your property line has a line type called a phantom line. And a phantom line, if you're not familiar with it, is a long line with a small dash, with a small line, small dash, small line, small dash, then a long line again. I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to select the whole thing. And over here where it says stroke, we're going to click inside here, and we're going to set this as a dash line. Okay. And this will dash our lines equally because it has a 12-point dash. That's it. But I'm going to change this to a phantom line. And I really don't know what the sizes are just because that is 16th inch scale versus a quarter inch scale. We've talked about this before. Lines and scales work differently. So it really goes based on the drawing. I'm going to say that this 12 point is a little small for that long dash. So let's start off with a 20. Let's see, what does that look like? Yeah, I would go bigger than that. Let's go 30. Maybe let's stick with 30. All right. So 30 is our big dash. Then the gap is um let's go 15. So let's go half of that. And then let's see what a 15 dash. And then we'll go with another 15 gap and a 15 dash and a 15 gap. So this is technically a phantom line, although our line here now needs to be longer. The proportions aren't correct. But this is what I mean, right? It's a long line with a gap, then a small line, gaps, small line, gap, long line, right? Let's control A so we select everything, but that longer line needs to be longer. So let's turn this. That's more like a phantom line. There we go. So this is the line type to show your property line. Okay, so everyone's site plan should have a property line, and we show the property line using this line type. So now I can go ahead and bring everything else in. And now let's go ahead and work on our above lines. So let's go ahead and turn off everything else. I'll select these and our above lines. Let's put them as a 0.75 and let's play with the dash. Now the above lines are just dashes, so I can go ahead and just delete all of this stuff. Now that's way too thick, or those lines are way too long. So we're gonna take this down to, let's see what that 20 looks like. No, it's still too big. Let's go with a 10. That's probably more like it. Let's bring everything back. That's more appropriate. Now with these above lines, I'm going to copy them because we're going to be adding a lot of swatches. We're going to be adding trees. We're going to be adding people. We're going to be adding color. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff to this. Um, and these above lines can very easily get lost in everything because we're not actually adding kind of a color, or we're not really adding a paint to them or a texture to them. They're just lines, so they can get lost really easily. And when we do a live paint, these lines are going to get stuck. Um, and they're going to get kind of grouped together with everything else. And so we're going to have to do a lot of double clicking on the line. Like if we live paint and we don't put it as a separate layer, we're going to have to double click a lot of times to be able to find the line, to be able to click on the line so we could adjust the line type if we need to make it thinner or thicker once we actually have all of the content inside, right? So what I actually do with any line work that I feel like, that might get lost after we do all of the paint stuff, I just copy it before we get started. So I'll go ahead and select the layer. I hold down the Alt key on the keyboard, and then I click and I drag. And you'll notice that it's going to make a copy because it has that hand symbol with that plus sign to the right of it, right? I'll go ahead and let go, and now it says above copy. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off because I might not need it at the end of the day, but I just want to have it there just in case. So I'll go ahead and turn it off so it's not there, but it'll be in the back of my mind. If I need to bring this line work back up, I could always bring this straight up, right? And so here we're ready. At this point, we've worked out our line work, our line weights, our line types, and we're ready to go ahead and get started painting. And this is where I'm going to pretty much leave you guys, just because at this point, you should have already watched the floor plan tutorial and the perspective section. At this point, you guys should be experts on adding swatches, live painting, adding people, putting trees, things like this. What I will say though is I did want to go ahead and create this prior to this lecture. Um, and let me pull up what I created just so you could see the finished product. So here, this is what I created, but I ended up coming up with. This is all using the swatches and all of the plan view, all the plan stuff, plan view silhouettes. I will say that I did end up, here's that above line, right? And in doing all of this, my above line did in fact get lost behind the trees. So like I would see it black and then ended up going behind these trees. So I did end up having to bring that above line, that copy that I did, above as the top layer so that it's kind of on top, above all of the trees. And I ended up making the lines a little bit thicker, right? Um, I'm realizing now I did not scale these people. These people look massive compared to these people walking around. So make sure you scale things appropriately. One thing about trees and placing trees, um, trees work like the bigger trees. You could scale them up. Um, but typically you want to kind of bundle them up a little bit more together. You also want to scale things. so and rotate so that they don't look like copy and paste. So here's like a copy and paste. All of these look exactly the same. And in some cases that works, that's fine. But in other cases, to create an illusion or create something that looks a little bit more filled, you want to rotate things, you want to scale them, make them different sizes, different things like that. And you'll also notice that some of these, you can make these, use those trees and those plants, and just by adjusting the scale of them, they could be little bushes or they could be massive like trees, right? So I think here we have two of the same ones. I think I did it, here it comes off more as a bigger tree and here it comes off more like a bush. Um, so just keep that in mind as well, right? But other than that, this is kind of the goal that we are trying to strive for, right? Hopefully this helps. Good luck. Please feel free to reach out if you have